Last time on the WizardCast.
Oh, hey Mark, what are you doing here? It's already past sunset.
Hello there, sir or madam.
Sir,
Do you
madam.
have a minute to talk about our Dark Lord and Master, Dracula the Ever-Living?
What, Mark? No, wait, Dracula?
Oh, yes. Oh, wait till I tell you. It really gets your blood pumping.
You're going door to door to talk about Dracula.
Sure. See? I have pamphlets. Here, drink them in.
Wow, these are awfully black. Vampires have missionaries?
Well, yeah. Where do you think new vampires come from?
Well, I always thought that vampires bit people.
Oh, Brian. The media really victimizes us with their lies. They're in the pocket of big garlic, you know?
No.
Such a pain in the neck. They've created so many hurtful stereotypes, but, you know, in our modern age, we should all, dine together at the same table, you know? May I come in?
And now the conclusion of the WizardCast.
I'm Brian Kwong.
And I'm Mark Ross.
We're Salesforce experts that love talking about technology and Salesforce.
We also love humor. Doesn't mean we're actually good at it.
In the Salesforce community, I'm known as the Salesforce Wizard, likely due to me wearing a wizard hat at Salesforce events.
And I'm known as Salesforce Yoda for pretty much the same reason.
You should see the ears.
We have a passion to help educate and entertain people.
So we've joined forces to create WizardCast.
We've got tips and best practices,
We talk with interesting people.
all mixed with quote-unquote jokes and humor.
Welcome to the WizardCast.
Brian, you made us coffee.
Indeed.
Yeah. Ugh, this tastes like dirt.
Well, that's not surprising. It was just ground this morning.
Please send us jokes better than that one. In particular, send us a joke by tweeting at wizardcast_pod or emailing wizardcast at thewizardnews.com.
So, Mark, you remember our episode with Mike Gerhalt?
Yeah, the last one.
Yeah, he was talking about navigating your career. You should totally listen to it if you haven't yet.
I should really go back and listen to it, yeah.
Yeah, he had this hypothesis about 70s kids being either Star Wars kids or Smokey and the Bandit kids.
And apparently we have a 3-question survey for quote-unquote research to see if Mike's theory actually holds water. If you haven't already chimed in, you can find that survey at bit.ly/70skidsurvey.
Or lowercase and 70, the numbers. You know what we need, Mark?
What do we need, Brian?
I think it's time for a coffee break.
I don't know, Brian. I just had some of your coffee, and I think I'm good for now.
No, Mark. Coffee break is where we take something shared by Peter Coffee and talk about it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, let's hear what Peter shared.
A few years ago, I got a really interesting phone call from one of our people working with our partners, Capgemini. They had in India produced a technology-themed reality TV competition called the Super Techies Show. Each week, a visiting representative from some technology company would present a problem, relatively real-world problem, and a team would off camera have had 2 weeks. 3 teams would have had a chance to produce their solution. They would present it in a studio setting, very much like a game show kind of or arena kind of thing.
Smoke.
There was smoke. There was lights. There was a live studio audience.
Oh, wow.
And they would be, questioned, and the judges would vote, and then the studio audience would also vote. And if the studio audience agreed, that was interesting. If they didn't, well, I'm sorry, the judges had the final say. And each week, one team would advance. And over the course of the season, you wind up with a series of eliminations. And in the finale, you have 3 teams left who have already gotten through the gates. And Capgemini came to Salesforce and said, we'd like you guys to be the presenter and lead judge for the final episode of the season, for the grand finale of season 2. And people said, we need someone techie who does TV. Oh, right. So needless to say, I got the call. And they said, we'd like to do something a little bit out of the regular space, not just a problem that Salesforce has, but like a world problem or something. Well, being Salesforce and being who I am and having spent some time in our auto industry practice and a few other things like that, I thought, okay, here's an idea. This is about the time that we were seeing the big news. I think it was it Tata that was saying we're going to produce a car for $2,500 for the India market. And I was thinking, there's a mixed blessing for you. Having spent some time in Bangalore, the thought that now more and more people would be able to afford a car is not an immediately good piece of news. And I thought, is there some way that instead of bicycles being the thing you leave behind as soon as you can afford to drive, we can do something that makes bicycles more of an upscale, collaborative, mode of transportation, so that maybe India doesn't choke to death on increased vehicular traffic. Now, I had an experience in Shanghai that had given me maybe some of the impetus for this idea. If you step out of the JW Marriott in Shanghai, literally on your left is the Ferrari dealer, across the square is the Mercedes dealer, and diagonally opposite you is the Porsche dealer, but the streets are full of bicycles. I mean, that's economic inequality, right? But the idea that a major city like Shanghai, the bicycle is actually the dominant mode of transportation, no matter how much money there is. And I thought, what if we could have a conversation like that in India? What if you could use cloud, mobile, and social technologies to make bicycling so much more attractive than it is today? What would happen? Well, we had three really great teams, and they proposed various ideas. One of them said, if you really want this to work, the bicycle has to be offered as a built-in accessory by someone like Land Rover. The vehicle has to be designed from the beginning to include a bicycle, the way a yacht includes a dinghy to take you to shore, includes a captain's gig. That was an interesting idea. One said, what are the real barriers? And this is very good. This is very Salesforce-y. What are the real barriers to becoming a bicycle rider? They said, it's really the bicycle store experience that's terrible. You walk in, you're surrounded by bikes. It takes forever to figure out which one you really like.
No idea what you need.
Yeah. What if we could construct an apparatus that you could bring to a company's lobby and people could sit on it and it would adapt itself to them, come up with their exact measurements, and produce a bespoke bicycle frame that fit them perfectly at a price that was competitive with an upscale bike, and make it hey, this bike will fit you. It will be made for you. Could we maybe draw people into the market that way? That was an interesting one. Or the use of mobile and social technology to have more of a bike sharing kind of model, and you're seeing that now in a lot of cities where it's run by a profit sector company. But anyway, these were really great sessions. In a way, though, I'm ahead of myself because now we're talking about the solutions that they presented. The Capgemini people loved this idea, but they said, hey, we'll make this great TV. The way this works is you have a segment that's filmed in the so-called challenge room where you present the problem. And then the teams come in and present their solutions. Now, actually, they got the problem beforehand. The challenge room is sort of a reenactment of the idea that you're giving them the problem.
It's
now,
TV.
It is. Now, for the season finale, they didn't get 2 weeks. They got 48 hours.
Wow.
So, pressure cooker type environment. And they had the idea, Peter, what if you ride a bike into the challenge room?
That sounds very Project Runway.
to present the problem. What if you ride a bike in? Well, word got around at Salesforce. And the people who do our Waves to Wine competitive entry, the multiple sclerosis, bicycling fundraiser, every year they have a heavily logoed Salesforce branded jersey produced by Pactimo. And they said, oh, you've got to wear one of the Salesforce jerseys for this. And so we did that, and the folks in India, had the bike rented. I didn't have to bring the bike with me. I did have to bring a bicycle helmet through international customs and immigration, and it was a pretty funny-looking object, and maybe they hadn't seen one of these things before because they wanted to, well, what is this for exactly? And I had to explain this to a somewhat skeptical Indian immigration official. I'm not sure if bike helmets are real big over there.
Worn it.
I could have done that, and that would have been interesting too. Now, have you ever been in a TV studio? There are little pockets of brightly lit, perfectly furnished space surrounded by dark caverns strewn with conduits and cables. So the last 50 yards into the challenge room on a bike was probably the dumbest ride I've ever tried to make in my life, because I had to make that ride, navigate through that space, and then gracefully sweep into the challenge room, dismount from my bike, and say, "Hi, I'm Peter Coffey with Salesforce, and I'm here to present you your grand finale challenge." And all of this is out there on YouTube.
I will find a link, and it'll be in the show notes.
All of this is out there on YouTube. If you just Google, Super Techies Season 2 Finale, it's all out there. And it will absolutely be one of the things I will always remember about my time with Salesforce, is the chance I got to be a reality TV show judge in India out of all. Now, the rest of the experience, the TV studio is out on the edges of Mumbai. It's surrounded by a wall. It looks like Osama bin Laden's compound. Okay? You come in through the gate. It's dirt roads. There are chickens. And then you step inside, and you feel like you're in a San Jose TV studio. And, the notion of, these parallel worlds of it, the tech stuff is just as high-tech as anywhere, but you're still in, you're still in India.
Was there a noticeable line of demarcation here? It's just, or is it literally
once you step into the building, bam, there's no intermediate zone. You literally go from dirt paths and chickens running around. You step into the building, and bang, you're in a TV studio.
Very Alice in Wonderland.
Very much. And one distinction that you will immediately notice is that jobs that in an American TV studio would almost all be being done by women, all being done by men. All the makeup techs, male. I haven't had very many times when the person doing my makeup for a TV thing has been male. Doesn't happen very often. The only women in the studio were the ones bringing tea and the customer, the Capgemini, people. It was a startling contrast, and that was one of the few ways you could say, "Oh, wait a minute, I'm not in San Jose," and it's just a reminder that the world in which we live doesn't all look like San Francisco. And this is something I occasionally have to remind people who get to live in the San Francisco bubble of Salesforce and say, just because the world comes to San Francisco for Dreamforce doesn't mean the world looks like San Francisco. And the more time we can spend out there in the field with customers, I think the better a job we're going to do of relating what we have to this problems they're trying to solve, instead of coming down from the mountaintop with some grand lofty vision and assuming that everyone's going to get that. Because I had a conversation the other day with an executive. His problem is if a competitor's truck fills up one of his storage tanks in a fuel distribution facility, that's a violation of contract terms, and he wanted to know if our IoT cloud could help him solve that problem. Absolutely. I guarantee you. Nothing in the phrases cloud computing, digital transformation, or fourth industrial revolution spoke to him about solving that problem. And I think all of us need to remind ourselves that what we'd like to do and why we'd like to do it is really not the point. What the customer rolled out of bed that morning thinking this is the problem I've got is always, I believe, the thing that ought to be first on our minds. And that's why spending time literally flying around the world. I mean, last year I did 180,000 air miles. Every time you get off a plane, you should rotate your radar and say, what's different here? How do they get stuff done here? What are the problems here? What are the resources here? And that's what makes the job, I think, genuinely interesting.
And with that, if you can't tell, we're talking with Peter Coffey, who's the VP of Strategic Research. He does need no introduction, but considering we might have people who don't know who Peter Coffey is, we have to do an introduction. But he pretty much gave his own introduction.
And you're talking about, so to continue on with the conversation,
yes.
Also not just what our customers are thinking and doing, but the customers of the customers
Absolutely.
as well, right? I've been working a lot with a dairy farmer co-op, and their concern is how their farmers perceive them. all these ideas, all these concepts of like how they're going to interact with, perhaps e-commerce platform. No, the farmers don't want anything to do with that right now. The current crop, no pun intended, because their phone is their window to technology, and that's if they're particularly up on things. They just a lot of people have no interest in carrying that one step further. They're concerned with what they're doing right now.
Well, the German philosopher Martin Heidegger wrote a thing called The Origin of the Work of Art a few years ago, and translating it is a little tricky. I mean, it's academic German, but the phrase that really sticks in my mind from it as best it can be translated, I believe, is the tool disappears into the function. If you're hammering and you're aware of the hammer, it probably means the head is loose or the handle is cracked or something is wrong. If you're aware of the tool, if it hasn't just disappeared into the fact that I'm driving a nail, probably it's the wrong tool or you're using it wrong or the tool is broken. And anytime you have to be conscious of technology, some people like technology. Most people just want it to disappear into the function. The same is true, frankly, for other things that we within the technology and to some extent the Salesforce community generally celebrate. We like change. We're excited by change.
That's our way we think. Our brains are motivated by it.
Well, we're in this business because we react well to it.
Right.
In general, people do not like change. In general, people don't seek opportunities for change, fear it, may actively resist it. They look at initiatives in terms of opportunities for success or failure, and much research shows people are far more averse to failure than they are attracted by possibilities of success. And what I've said to our account executives is, if you come out of a Salesforce culture thrilled with our 3 times a year pace of major upgrades, the acquisitions that allow us to broaden our portfolio, the conversations you want to have with customers, you may be bringing a basket of adorable kittens to someone with a cat allergy. And you wonder, why aren't they fascinated by these cute little things?
Why don't they just understand?
Why do they look like they wish I would just go? And you have to be in the state of mind of the person to whom you're trying to bring the change. Right. And this is not an original observation. I mean, in various religious faiths, you will find that the people regarded as having done the most to promote that church over its decades or centuries or whatever of experience, they're the ones who went to people where they were instead of the ones who invited people to come to where you are. And going to people where they are and having the conversation about the world in which they live and the things that are on their mind, I think is an underrated skill. It's so easy to become focused on, oh my gosh, look at the scope of the material I have to get my head around. Okay, fine. Now I'm ready. Now I can go and come down from the mountaintop with the stone tablets and say, here it is. Darn, why are they still worshiping that golden calf over there? You know, and that to use one religious tradition's example of that disjunction between what people want to do and what you can't understand why they won't do it. So a lot of us now really need to be more anthropologists than engineers.
Well, and to carry forward that particular example, you have a lot of cases, particularly in religious history, where new things were brought. The old traditions were not lost.
No.
They were merged in.
Well, sure.
In order to make sure that the people would receive it well.
Sure.
And those have seen the most success over time.
Well, why do you think Christmas is celebrated in December?
It matches up with Yule and a number of other...
and actually, it matches up with Roman Saturnalia.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, it matches up with the celebrations of the winter solstice when, good, the sun looks like it's going to come back after all.
Right.
Why do you think Christmas is 3 days after the longest night of the year? Because in Roman times it was, good, we got away with it one more time. The days are starting to lengthen again. And so there was a big celebration going on anyway, and you can kind of hide it in there. Well, if you're going to walk in, and frankly, you can go back in the very earliest years of Salesforce and find people saying things like, and now you won't need a CIO. Things like that. And, I'm sorry, as it turns out, data governance benefits from people who do this for a living. You know, we are professionals. You should not be trying to do this at your desktop. I've actually just finished what turned out to be almost twice as long as the minimum requested length chapter for a book about data governance. And among the things that I got into was the long tail of data containers in this world are not even desktop databases, but are spreadsheets. They are not designed to be data containers. They do not have the robustness of even a desktop database like a DBase or an Access. It is astonishingly easy to have a cell in a spreadsheet that's supposed to represent the inflation rate used for your economic calculations. It might even have a label next to it saying inflation rate. And you might have cells that are using an absolute cell reference to make sure they all point to that inflation rate. All you need to do is in one place leave out the $sign that says, no, really, look at that actual column, not just that many columns to the left of where you are right now. All you have to do is leave that $sign out once and then start copying formulas. And the next thing you know, all of the copied formulas are looking at blank spaces to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right, to the right of the thing you all thought they were looking at. And there is nothing that raises its hand and say, are you sure you meant to do this? And someone once said the only thing that spreadsheets propagate well across an organization is formula errors.
As a person who's written a lot of spreadsheets, yes, that's absolutely true.
And so you wind up with, and maybe someone not realizing they were supposed to be using that cell just went ahead and put an inflation rate into a formula itself. And so you change the number and you assume that it's propagating all the way through, but there's nothing that raises its hand and says so. And this is the problem, is that spreadsheets wind up being, and they have data sorting functions and things. I mean, we made it easy for people to use them as sort of limited function databases, but they don't have any of the rigor or the safety tools that would assure any kind of coherence or discipline in data management. And they're out there all over the place. And there's a wonderful website run by the European Spreadsheet Risks Interest Group called USPRIG Horror Stories, with an extraordinary number of incidents of formula error, logic error, collaboration failure, collaboration unintended. You know, a spreadsheet that gets posted online because someone thinks it's just a summary table, not realizing that there were hidden columns or pivot tables or other things. There's hordes and hordes of sensitive detail in there that they thought had been taken out on the summary level. And they didn't realize that by sharing the spreadsheet, all that stuff is there. All that stuff is there. It's like the people who think that they've posted a redacted document online, but it was a PDF, and all you have to do is copy and paste the blacked out lines and paste them into a notepad, and there it is in all of its glory. The world makes it so easy now to collect and share data, and so easy not to realize that you're sharing stuff you didn't mean to share. And work done at places like MIT is showing that you can think that you've got very ordinary anonymized data. It doesn't actually take very much these days to take 5 unrelated pieces of data and do a metadata triangulation on them that gives you a high probability of identifying a single human being out of that. And the algorithms and the power to do that are improving so rapidly that, frankly, technical experts are being overtaken by this, and regulation is left in the dust. GDPR is an attempt to introduce some norm for, hey, it's information about me, therefore I get to know things about where it's being kept and how it's being used and so on. And yet I can show you interviews that have been done with people who work with data for a living who are saying, I've read this GDPR thing. I don't even think it's algebraically possible to do all the things that it requires simultaneously. You're going to have to pick something. And this is an example I've been using for a long time. There are plenty of European countries in which there's long-standing rules saying you have to inform people about what you're doing with their data. And other rules that say if a legitimate public safety agency is targeting someone for an investigation and they subpoena their data, you are not allowed to tell them that they are a target of an investigation. Well, I'm sorry, that's a very obvious conflict. You're doing something with this person's data. I can go to jail if I don't tell them, except that if I tell them, I can go to jail. And getting this all to mesh is really the new challenge, because as we have seen in letters of fire written across the sky over the last year, you screw up trust, and you're in big trouble.
I want to kind of go back a little bit. You were saying you were talking to AEs about,
Of course,
the change that Salesforce customers may not be ready for or understand.
yes.
And
An account executive has to understand you're walking in the door as an agent of change, not just as an agent of software selling.
And yesterday we had Dr. Natalie, and I'm sorry,
Pedoff.
Natalie. Thank you, Pedoff.
Yeah, Pedoff, yes.
Talk about exponential organizations and exponential technology, and which is basically another way of saying that this disruptive technology is causing change, and you need to adapt.
That's a second issue. The first issue that I was talking about is just resistance to change generally. The exponential issue is even people who think they're good at dealing with change can be startled by the nature of exponential curves. Exponential is used sloppily by people who just want to say really, really fast. Literally, exponential means changing at a constant percentage rate per unit time. So 2% times 2%, 1.02, 1. These things compound. Are you familiar with the phrase the second half of the chessboard? Okay.
No.
This is used by a number of people. The people that I heard use it heavily were Andy McAfee and Eric Brynjolfsson at MIT, who are well known as the authors of Race Against the Machine, Second Machine Age. They've been on 60 Minutes. They're rock stars. There's the old legend that the inventor of chess was going to be rewarded by the emperor for his brilliant contribution, and he said, "Majesty, I'm a humble man. Merely place a grain of wheat on the first square of the chessboard, 2 on the second, 4 on the third, and so on, and I will be well rewarded." First half of the chessboard, not too bad. First 16 squares, 2 to the 16, okay, it's a lot of grains of wheat. Second half of the chessboard, when you start out at 2 to the 17, and I'm sorry, 2 to the 32, you start at 2 to the 33, and you're up to 2 to the 64 by the time you're done. The second half of the chessboard, you start out with 4,096 grains of wheat on the first square, and then you go from there. The second half of the chessboard, the distinction between a little bit more aggressive than linear growth and, oh my gosh, this is a hockey stick curve, becomes enormously visible, hence the expression the second half of the chessboard. And when you look at transitions like data collection off of wearable devices, measurement of behavior from a retail store where I know how much time you spent looking at each display and maybe whether your pupils dilated while you were looking at it. Do you realize that there is now technology and business models in place for optimizing the smells in a retail environment?
I've heard about that.
Because
Walk by an Abercrombie and Fitch.
leather?
There's
Oh,
big perfume cloud
perfumes?
that
Okay.
wafts out.
Well, the smell of fresh leather, the smell of baked bread. Olfactory triggers are tremendously powerful, and someone said, essentially, the science of engineering the smell is about where background music technology was, 40 years ago. Muzak is not just background music. It's optimized over the course of a day to give you, peaks and resting periods and to, kind of optimize human productivity. The ability to optimize a retail environment with all sorts of cues that are not going to be visible. Remember what I said before, the tool disappears into the function. And I've had this conversation with a number of people in the hospitality business who want the technology to be invisible and effortless. They don't want people to have to carry an iPad. They want them to be able to recognize every customer, apparently just by, knowing who they are, and say, "Oh, Mr. Anderson, your wife wanted to let you know her spa appointment's running a little bit late, but she expects to be meeting you for lunch 10 minutes after your reservation, and we're holding your table for you." They want to be able to have that kind of conversation without technology even being visible. They're very interested in things like the Apple Watch. We can glance at your wrist and know, "Oh yeah, Mr. Anderson, tell him his wife is going to look for him for lunch 10 minutes late." They're working on this kind of thing because this is now... I think you remember my Midwest Dreamin keynote maybe a year or two ago where I said, if you want to live in the future, spend time in luxury markets, because yesterday's luxury is today's middle-class aspiration and tomorrow's democratized, everybody's got one. Look at cell phones. They were a badge of affluence and significance 30 years ago, and then they became merely an accessory of the moderately affluent professional, and then the next thing you know, everybody's got one. And this is true of many technologies, and exponential change, to get back to where we were a few moments ago. Exponential means grasping the notion that processes that used to be able to cope with change as long as you had the right attitude, well, now your processes need to be basically re-engineered. And we've been talking about this at Salesforce for a long time, because the technology cycle used to be 3 to 10 years on the desktop. Windows XP had over 50% market share on its 13th birthday. And the mobile cycle is more like 5 to 8 months rather than 3 to 10 years. Well, the process of building applications for a new device cannot be allowed to take 5 months if that's 5/8 of the lifespan of the device. And that process is more limited by people than it is by technology. And that's why we had to bring people the platform leverage that we've spent so much time developing, and things like the Salesforce DX developer experience, things that accelerate building applications, because it's not just a nice to have. If you have a 5-month application development cycle in an 8-month cycle world, you're going to have to skip generations of devices or give people incomplete experiences, and you will have your head handed to you by people who were the first to be available on every successive generation device. And I always enjoy pointing out to people that when the first iPhone appeared in 2007 with no App Store and no SDK, we were the only business application that could be shown on the first iPhone, because you could run the whole thing in a Safari browser, which Steve Jobs said, hey, that's all you need is a fully functional browser. And then fast forward 8 years, we were the only business application they could show on the Apple Watch on launch. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we made a basic commitment to 20 years ago, this idea that a metadata-based environment will allow you to pour your wine into whatever bottle comes along. And that's why responsive design and other ideas that are really quite challenging and expensive to deliver in most environments, we can do responsive design all day long.
Just to follow up with what you were saying, the numbers you were quoting just now are for a commercial environment. You get into a government environment, a 5-month cycle typically for any other non-Salesforce software development in Gov would be twice as long, if not more.
Oh, far longer.
Right.
Longer.
But I know, having actually attended like DC World Tour and listened to people like from the Department of State who have done development on Salesforce, their cycles are now becoming similar to the corporate.
Yes.
Where they're adopting Salesforce.
Yes.
As their method of deploying. And I know a lot of more and more agencies are moving in that direction.
The challenge for us as a platform offeror, and this is an internal conversation that I drive at every opportunity, is you cannot think of Salesforce Platform as a product with a spec sheet with a feature list.
Right.
Every conversation about platform has to be from the point of view of the person to whom you're speaking. Because the person to whom you're speaking is writing spreadsheets today. You want to talk about Salesforce Platform as a low-code, no-code tool. If the person you're talking to is writing Java or C# or C++ code today, you want to talk to them about the opportunity to use the languages they know in the enormously elastic and scalable environment of Heroku, and the ability to deliver applications that are device neutral in far less time. You must filter the question of what does the platform represent through the 6 blind men and the elephant kind of thing about, does this guy want trees, or does this guy want a rope, or does this guy want a spear? Right. And then make sure that you're talking about the aspect of platform that's relevant to that person. There is no one way to talk about platform, because it is designed to be approachable from so many different angles, from so many different skill sets, and yet in every case wind up with what you really want, which is a secure, collaborative, timely, accurate, works in any environment solution to a business problem based on shared truth with rigorous protection and management of privileges. And that's a relatively long statement to say that's a one short sentence, but really, if you leave out any of those pieces, I believe you wind up missing something that's really important in today's environment.
So how do we... All right, I'm going to start this by saying I always love talking with you because I come away feeling both smarter and dumber at the same time. One of the challenges that I have that makes me feel dumber is I go, oh, that's really interesting. That's a really great point. I wish I thought about it. And then I stop and I realize I have no idea how to apply that to me and to what I do. So for some 300 or so listeners that is listening to this right now, trying to go, well, that's really interesting information, but
I appreciate you challenging me on that, because during my first 5 years at the company, I had a lot of people say, wow, I get it. That's where we're going. Long pause. I have no idea what the first step is. What do I do tomorrow?
Signing the contract for the licenses.
No. Actually, that's not the conversation we want to have, because we don't want shelfware. And ever since that truth hit home to me, I've tried to end presentations with a tangible call to action. So, for example, what could you do tomorrow? You could walk around your company and look for places where a critical process is only embodied in the logic of a spreadsheet, or an important set of data is only kept in a spreadsheet or a desktop database, and find out why, find out what the barriers have been to turning that into a well-governed, securely managed, mobile, collaborative, frequently upgraded without breaking it tool. Find out what the barriers have been, whether of perception or of resource or of knowledge, and say, we can fix that. And success stories gain momentum, and people start saying, how did you do that? And then you're not having to push your skills or Salesforce technology. People are coming to you and saying, hey, I want some of what you did for those guys. Can I second one of my people to your organization if that's what it takes? You know, if you don't have the headcount, and you wind up with are you familiar with the children's story Stone Soup?
Yes.
Yeah. The 3 soldiers come into town, and everyone is terrified that they're going to take all the food, so they hide all the food, and the soldiers say, "Oh, what a shame. Do you have 3 rocks?" Yeah. And they start boiling the water in a kettle in the town square and put in the rocks and start stirring it and saying, "Oh, this is going to be so good. If we just had a carrot, that would add a lot." And they're making soup out of stones. Okay, I might have a carrot or two. And next thing you know, the whole village has contributed their carrots, their beef, their vegetables, their beer. They wind up having a huge feast, because everyone, when they start to say, hey, wait a minute, I can be part of something here, brings what they've got. I think the stone soup model is the way that Salesforce works in organizations. You don't begin saying, I'm here to re-platform you. You don't even necessarily begin by saying, I'm here to re-CRM you, which really was our initial model. Unplug your old CRM, plug in a shiny new CRM. I think in many cases we can begin with, oh, what a shame. You have no real database capability. You don't have a real application to do that. You're having to function with a spreadsheet. What a shame. Here, let's build this Force.com thing and see how that does. And the notion of a minimum viable product, meaning something good enough that people say, wow, look how quickly that got done. Hey, can you add this thing? Oh, sure. And they start to see, oh my gosh, this is a new world where I don't have to wait a year for a bad approximation of a misunderstood notion of what I wanted to come lurching forth into the light like Frankenstein's monster. I get something that's a lot like what I had in mind and converges very quickly as soon as I can describe what I want done differently. And it changes the conversation, I think, in a genuinely interesting way.
Okay.
That's what you can do tomorrow. Walk around the company, look for the spreadsheets and the desktop databases with email threads wrapped around them and say, that's a Force.com app begging to be written.
And I absolutely love that as a takeaway. And I'm going to follow up with another one because, or not a takeaway, I'm going to follow up with another question.
Okay.
I've talked to a lot of admins who that's exactly what they're trying to do. They say, I've seen this process or I've seen this piece of data. I know we could do it in Salesforce. They're the only ones at that company who are interested in doing it. And so the managers and the executives either don't see the value of having their admin that they're paying good money for spend time on this, hey, let's move the spreadsheet into the cloud. So do you have tips for those of us who are fighting an upstream battle to even get to the point where we're allowed to spend our time building the replacement or the transforming that critical piece of data into a cloud-based product?
The triggering moment, I believe, is when you realize that failure to change is a greater risk than change. And being prepared with the story of this is what our biggest competitor just did. This is what this hot new startup is proposing to do. This is the development in our customer environment that has triggered a new opportunity. This is a regulatory change like GDPR, where we're going to be in big trouble if we try to do this ourselves because we don't have the resources or the skills to meet these new requirements. A fact has changed. The nice thing about being able to point to an external fact is that you don't have to say to someone, you've been doing it wrong and I'd like to rescue you, because no one wants to admit they've been doing it wrong. You want to be in a situation where you can say, yeah, what we've been doing has been really good so far. Let me show you why what we have to do tomorrow is going to have to be different if we want to keep doing the right thing. Because the idea that you can congratulate someone for having been doing the right thing all along and then say, and if you want to continue that brilliant success and outstanding leadership, here's an environmental change that will make you continue your success if you can adapt to it and maybe even be the first to exploit it. You have to present people with an opportunity to be right and not with an opportunity to admit that they've been wrong, because people are not good at admitting that they've been wrong.
Alternatively, not just an opportunity to achieve success, but an opportunity to avoid failure. I know a fair number of admins who have managed to get through initiatives like this on the back of GDPR.
Yes.
Like this, we need to go to
GDPR
Lightning
is a wonderful opportunity to initiate a conversation about this is a massive external event that demands a new behavior if we are not going to wind up in legal trouble, in brand reputation trouble, whatever. For example, IBM just came out with a report the other day estimating that the average data loss or data breach involving 100,000 or fewer records, including direct costs and indirect costs of things like damage to brand reputation and other things, is $3.86 million.
For under
100,000 records. Mega breaches involving a massive company's data set, multiplied by 10. $30 to $40 million. Now, saying to someone, look, we are holding customer data, credit card transactions, we are holding company data, intellectual property, we are holding employee data, medical stuff, retirement plan stuff. This is financial data, this is health data. We are vulnerable. We don't do this for a living. Cloud providers like Salesforce do. Failure to use their protections not only requires us to spend more money to do it ourselves, but to take a greater risk that we're not doing it as well as they would do it for us. And in a GDPR world, that stops being a we didn't know better. That stops being a deniable error and becomes a you had no excuse. You have to let me show you what we can do and the security advantages. See, a lot of people still believe in their gut that doing it in the cloud means accepting a greater risk in return for saving money. A lot of people in their brains, they think cloud is, well, I can do it cheaper if I'm willing to tolerate loss of control and threat to security. And so if there's one meme that I need to repair in people's brains, it's that one. I need to say, number one, it's not loss of control. It's your data. If you take it when you leave us, we're contractually obligated and architecturally capable of flushing all of it out in 90 days, and we will. So that's number one. Number two, control. You can do simple things very quickly in Force.com, and you can do anything you want to with whatever level of code you want to write in the combination of Force.com and Heroku. And you can control down to the pixel level of presentation if you want to, or you can take something that looks more like our generic presentation and put your logo and color on. You can, there's a whole spectrum here. control you can have. Ownership of your data you can have. And the security, you need to point out to people, the big security breaches have been companies that were running their own stuff. TJ Maxx, Equifax, Sony, the big, scary breaches. None of those involved someone successfully attacking an Amazon, Google, or Salesforce database, because we do this for a living. We had a customer, a contractor that does a lot of work with the defense industry and therefore has very high standards for security, that did a 2-month review of our security before deciding to do a major replatforming on us. There were literally 2 things that they found. There was an exterior water faucet on one of the buildings in which we have our pods that did not have a locked box on it, and someone in theory could put a hose on that faucet, stick it into an air vent, and flood the building. We said, okay, we can put a locked box on the water faucet. And number 2, if you arrived to visit and log in, you could, if you were quick, read the names above you on the page and know that executives from their company had been there that day. We said, okay, we can fix that. 2-month review. And those simple, easily fixed things were the only things that they found that they wanted remedied. And of course, now that we fixed those in a multi-tenant environment, all of our customers now enjoy that same protection. That's the other thing about multi-tenancy. And if I can fix that one flawed perception, an enormous number of people who currently don't believe that we're relevant to them would suddenly say, oh, wait a minute. Okay, I don't want to overwhelm people with reasons why they shouldn't use us. I want to find out what are the things that make them think they can't and eliminate those. I want to eliminate the barriers more than I want to pile up the positives, because the negatives are what's going to kill you. The one in someone's mind deal breaker negative is an enormous problem, and I can pile up positives all day, but if they think that their regulator won't let them do it, it doesn't matter. And so I have to find out what in your mind are the reasons not to do this, and then deal with them, at which point the overwhelming positives suddenly flood into view, suddenly become visible to them in a way that they were literally, almost literally, invisible when they were overwhelmed by the perceived, this is why I can't do it. So walk around the company, find the spreadsheets and the desktop databases with email wrapped around them and say, there's the opportunity, and then ask and really listen with very, very open ears to find out what would get in the way of doing that, and then strip away the excuses until there's no excuse for not giving it a try. And at that point, wonderful things happen. And this is something anyone can do. Any admin can do this with no budget, no headcount, and no permission. Don't wait for permission. Really. Do not wait for permission.
Well,
in fact, this is the same...
talked about yesterday. Make bold decisions.
Well, this is the same conversation that we could be having in lots of other spaces. For example, when we're talking about things like gender inequality in the workplace, if you wait for a job to be posted in most companies, by the time it's been posted, they probably already know who they want to give it to, and they're just posting it because there's a requirement that it be posted. If you start doing a job that needs doing, that no one's written a job description for, and you were right that it needed doing, I have seen multiple cases in which someone just said, I'm going to start doing this. And the next thing you know, an action group nucleates around them, and at some point it becomes their actual job. But you begin by doing it, not by being invited to do it. And this is true whether we're talking about driving Salesforce into an organization, or driving more women into technical roles, or driving any number of things to make them happen. If you want it to happen, start doing it.
Wow, that was a long coffee break.
Yeah, we're so in trouble if the boss catches us.
Well, let's not get caught then.
Do we have a boss?
Who's the boss?
I think Charles is in charge.
I always thought it was Mona.
WizardCast is produced by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, directed by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, technical administration by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, script writing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, audio editing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, website maintenance by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, and our intern this episode was Meredith Stretz.
You can be an intern too. Just follow us at WizardCast_pod on Twitter.
Or come up to us during events like Dreamforce, which is coming up, and then tweet about us so we remember to add you to the list.
Send us your interview suggestions, jokes, videos, tips, and feedback to WizardCast at thewizardnews.com, or head over to thewizardnews.com and click Contact WizardCast.
And we want to hear, and we need to hear from you. So if you could ask Parker Harris one question, what would it be?
Submit a question by going to bit.ly/ParkerQuestions, all lowercase, and fill out our short form.
And fans of the WizardCast know that we like to do these idea exchange highlights where we pick ideas out there and talk about them to let people know what they are out there. We're going to do another segment, and we want to know what ideas you think need some highlighting.
Go to bit.ly/idea highlight to submit an idea to us.
Don't forget to subscribe to the WizardCast and receive our next episode automagically.
And please post reviews on Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, and share this episode. It helps others to hear what you just learned from.
Hey, Mark, do you know that we are actually available on the Google Podcast app now?
It's about damn time, Brian.
So if you have an Android device and you want to use the Google Podcast app, you can click the link in the show notes or on our website, and it'll take you directly to our show.
That's the Google Podcasts app, not the Google Play app.
But we're on there too. Once again, I'm Brian.
And I'm going to go file down these canines. They're kind of getting in the way of drinking through a straw. Ironic, really.
Thanks for listening. He had this hypothesis about 70s kids being either Star Wars or Smokey and the Bear Bandits.
Smokey and the Bear Bandits?
Kids.
You want to say that?
Yeah. Yeah.
There is no Smokey and the Bear Bandits. It's Smokey and the Bandits.
Did I say Bear Bandits?
You said Smokey and the Bear Bandits. Only you can prevent flubbed lines.